Hey, my name is Jamey Arent, and in this lesson, I'm going to show you how to solo more organically using melodic phrasing. As guitar players, we learn a lot of our scale shapes in these geometric boxes, and it makes sense given the layout of the guitar. But then our creative soloing gets locked into these boxes and shapes. And there's also so much great guitar vocabulary that sometimes we get locked into these very stereotypical cliche guitar kind of licks. We want to break out of those boxes and make our solos sound a little more interesting, a little more organic, and a little bit more like what we're hearing in our heads. So in this lesson, I'm going to show you how to break out of that box and start to make your solos more interesting rhythmically and melodically using something called phrasing. Basically, what we're going to do is make your solos sound a little more human, a little more interesting, a little more organic. So when we learn a scale, like say the A minor pentatonic scale, what we've basically learned is an alphabet. This is an alphabet that, say, works over an A7 chord, playing over a blues, or playing over a one-chord vamp for this example. And it's great to be able to play out of that scale, but really when we're just playing lines that sound like the scale, that's like walking around going A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. You don't go around repeating the alphabet, right? We take the letters from the alphabet to form words. And then once we have words, we form phrases and we form sentences. And this is how we express ourselves. So what we're going to think about is taking a guitar solo the same way you speak, the same way you express yourself every day. You might have an idea of what you're going to say when you go speak with someone, but you don't memorize it word for word, right? You have a general sense of what your point is, what you're trying to get across. And because you know so many words and phrases, you're going to use that. So the first thing we're going to do to make this happen is limit what you have access to. That way you can really just focus on the rhythm. And rhythm is one of the most important factors in phrasing, because if you play just a lot of notes with no spaces, you're not going to give your listener or the band that you're playing with any time to reflect and respond to what you're playing. If I went around and I was talking, hey, how you doing? My name is Jamey. You're not going to really absorb what I have to say because there's no rests. So if you say something and you leave a little bit of a pause or a little bit of a rest, that's going to allow the listener to take in what you've said, so it's more meaningful what you've played. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to play out of this A minor pentatonic scale shape, but I'm going to limit myself to just these two notes, just the A and the C on the top string, the 5th fret and the 8th fret. And you'll see that when I don't have access to this full scale, my only option is to make my solo more interesting rhythmically, because I don't have all the notes melodically. So I have to use rhythm to make it more interesting and not boring. So check it out. So I don't have this entire vocabulary now, so I have to think about rhythm. So now I'm going to add in the top 2 strings now, so I have a little more to work with. So all of a sudden, my solos become a little more interesting, a little more melodic, and a little more memorable. Now, obviously, I wouldn't lock myself into a 1-string or 2-string confines on the gig, but it's a great practice tool to really force yourself. And you can do this with all sorts of parameters. Like, let's just say I'm going to take a solo, but I'm only going to play on the lower couple strings, maybe the lower 2 strings, which is a great way to start a solo because it gives you a place to build. Or I'm only allowed to play above the 12th fret. So by forcing yourself into these uncomfortable boxes with limits, you'll actually find more interesting ways to play because you have to compensate for the fact that you don't have access to all the notes. So all of a sudden, rhythm becomes much more interesting. And rhythm is stuff that people really identify when they listen and can respond to. So here's another technique I use to make my solos sound a little more interesting. As guitar players, we really rely on muscle memory a lot of the time. We learn these common guitar licks, and we play them a lot because they just kind of come out of our hands a lot of the time, right? Because we're so used to just playing these licks. And these kind of lines are great, but sometimes we want to try something new, something a little bit different. So what I recommend doing is actually singing and making your guitar match what you're singing. Why is playing what you sing a good technique? Well, as guitar players, we don't have to breathe for our instrument. Unlike a saxophone player or a trumpet player, they actually have to take the instrument out of their mouths, breathe, put air into the instrument. But as guitar players, we can talk, we can chew gum, we can make conversation. We don't rely on breath. So our hands can just, do all the work. And this also applies to keyboard players, bass players. And as a result, we can really tend to overplay because we don't need to breathe. So if you're singing, you actually have to take that natural breath in order to make the music. And that gives you this automatic little bit of phrasing. It forces you to take those pauses, those rests. I don't know if you've ever been driving in the car or singing along with a recording or maybe in the shower, and you sing kind of a guitar solo in your head without the guitar. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but it's like, wow, why don't I play ideas like that when I'm actually playing guitar? Why do these ideas or these kind of bluesy phrases or these kind of cool lines only come out when I'm singing? Well, what you're singing is really what's inside you musically, and that's your expression. And so you want to be able to make that come out on the guitar. And you don't have to be a great singer or any kind of singer at all, or do a George Benson thing. What's important is that you're matching your guitar to what you're singing, even if it's just a few notes. Check it out. Those ideas, I guarantee you, if I wasn't singing, I wouldn't have played those. I probably would have been playing, licks, copying my favorite guitar players. And so it's a great tool to have. And it doesn't have to be something you bring out live necessarily or right away. It can just be something you use in your practice to develop the idea of leaving space and developing rhythmic phrasing. Lastly, another thing you can do to make your solos a little more interesting is to use something called motivic development. What that is you're basically going to take an idea and you're going to sort of morph it, transform it, and make a little call and response conversation. So if you've ever listened to somebody who's a good speaker, an engaging speaker, you'll notice that they'll say something, they'll leave a pause so you can reflect on what they said. And in everyday speech, when we really want to emphasize something, we might repeat the same idea. For example, if you really don't want something to happen, you might say, no, 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 no. Would one no suffice? Sure, but by saying multiple no's, you're really getting the point across. So sometimes you can take an idea and repeat it for emphasis, but you can also take an idea and develop it, kind of like a conversation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by playing. That's my first idea. Then I'm going to develop it. So check it out. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So I took this basic rhythm, ba-da, ba-da, ba. And the first time, I played that. Then the second time, I took the same rhythm, but I went down instead of up. First time I went up. Second time I went down. So that's almost like a conversation. How are you? I'm fine. And then the third time I take the same idea, but I take it a little higher. And then the fourth time, I go back to the second idea. And after that, maybe I'm ready to go somewhere else and take a new idea. So starting a solo like that can really give you some building blocks, right? Because when we play a guitar solo, it's like we're telling a story. We want it to have, just like a story, a novel, a movie, introduce the characters, build up to tension, have the big climax, the big finale, and then wrap it up. Because if you start your solo up here with all these notes, you're going to hit a wall and there's going to be nowhere else to go. But if you start your solo down here and build, you'll have more longevity in what you play. It'll be more interesting to listen to, and you won't get bored and the listener won't get bored. So if you take an idea and develop it, it'll give you a great springboard to go somewhere new. That's what I'm talking about. 1, 2, 3. So when you're soloing, it's really important to think about space, think about building, and really think about rhythms. Rhythms are so important in what we play because it really makes your solo interesting and memorable and more fun for you to play. And it'll help you break out of these pentatonic patterns and guitaristic patterns that we all know and love, but maybe don't want to play all the time. I hope this lesson was helpful. Thank you for watching. Once again, my name is Jamey Arent, and I will see you in the next lesson.